Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Your Way podcast. So we are, or I am, doing a solo episode today. And as calm as I may seem right now, I'm quite animated about this one. I think it's entirely possible that we may find more swear words than normal creeping in. And so just an invitation to make sure you've got earphones on or you haven't got little people around. So today we are going to talk about the number one cause of the current health crisis. And spoiler alert, I don't think there is just one cause. But this podcast episode today is in response to a book that my husband read after listening to a podcast on it and then recommended it to me. And the book is called Bad Therapy by a lady called Abigail Schreier. I'm not going to show you the book because I sure as hell am not advocating that you read the book. So I've got the gist. I've listened to the podcasts and I'm just listening to, because I got it on Audible, Nat's got the hard copy, just listening to 42 minutes of this audiobook last week and I was absolutely incensed. Like off the charts, so angry that I had to stop listening to it, orient on my walk, calm myself down. But it has brought up some stuff I think it's really, really important that we talk about. So the premise of the book, please don't read it. You can if you want. The premise of the book is that the reason that we are in this space where so many young people have now got mental health issues and challenges is because that children are being given therapy when they shouldn't have. She attacks gentle parenting, which is an approach where parents, god awful parents, sarcasm in case it's not clear and you're not watching this on YouTube, are asking their children how they feel. And then they're saying things like, oh, that seems like a big emotion. How are you feeling? And that apparently is causing issues because back in the good old days when no one had any mental health issues, yeah, I'm going to get angry. Back in the good old days when no one had any mental health issues, and little Johnny came home from school and was upset and was just told to suck it up and get on with it, little Johnny was fine. But now, little Johnny's son is traumatized. Well, well. Let's unpick just that piece, right? Because when little Johnny got told to suck it up, and he didn't get to feel sad or angry or upset or probably joyful or excited, and then little Johnny had a kid, and his kids also had to suppress all of their emotions, and then they had kids, and then it's all completely fucked up because no one knows how to feel anything. Maybe that caused some issues rather than a parent at some point down the line deciding to try and break the cycle and ask the fucking kid if they're okay and how they're feeling. So, my suggestion is that giving children a voice and asking children how they feel and not just lambasting children and giving them some options is not necessarily a terrible, terrible thing to do. But more than that, there's a whole chapter on all of these different reasons why talking about stuff doesn't help. So you can look at the premise of, well, actually over pathologizing children is not a positive thing and labeling people isn't a positive thing. And I'm down with that. I don't think that it's that particularly helpful that everyone just gets an ADHD label now and some medication to take for their ADHD. Like, let's look at what's happening that means that so many people are now being diagnosed with ADHD, right? But she's not just having a pop at the fact that her 8-year-old, this is what happened. Her 8-year-old had a stomach ache, went to the hospital. And one of the things that the hospital did was ask her to leave the room so that they could ask the 8-year-old some mental health questions. This is in the US. And on the list of questions asked were things included: have you considered killing yourself in the last 7 days? And if yes, how? Okay. Now, I'm not going to disagree that it's completely inappropriate to ask an 8-year-old who's gone into hospital with a stomach complaint if they're suicidal and if and how they've contemplated killing themselves. I agree that that is a step too far. But if the 8-year-old's crying of an upset stomach, I also don't think life sucks, get on with it, rather than, okay, your stomach's hurting, what's going on? How are you feeling? Is that terrible? So take a breath. So if we're not going to try and blame, people trying to give a shit about young people, even if it goes a little bit awry. And this is not the episode for my views on governmental intervention on most things, but I'll be honest, I think an episode on that is coming, and I'll be angry then too. But I don't think we need to be attacking parents who are now trying to undo family generational trauma and cycles of dysfunction in the way that they parent their kids. So let's not add more stigma, more shame into a role that is really bloody hard by telling parents who are trying to do things a different way that they're still getting it wrong. It's just not helpful. Okay, so let's look at some other reasons why I don't even think it's just the young people. I think why most people generally are struggling. And let's just have a little bit of a look at some of the things that we might do that actually help, because I think it's so easy for people who are trying to sell a book or pharmaceutical product or a political agenda to blame and focus and hone in on one thing. And all we end up doing in that mix is we completely disregard the entire holistic range of approaches available. We disregard looking beyond the symptom. So someone can't focus, they find it hard to concentrate. Oh, it's ADHD, let's give them some medication, rather than like, okay, well, what's the lifestyle factors? What's the circumstances? What's going on for this person that results in that? Well, they can't do that because number one, the drug companies wouldn't make any money. And number two, that doesn't fit in the 10-minute appointment that the doctor has available in order to deal with the patient in front of them. But you, get to think about this a little bit more deeply and challenge the narrative that is coming in your direction. And we're going to have many more conversations like this on this podcast because I want to empower you to think about things in a slightly different way. So, back in the day, when little Johnny was a kid, getting absolutely fuck all emotional support from his parents, who just told him to suck it up, little Johnny lived in the same village as his grandparents and his aunts and his uncles. And even when his parents were shit, he could go to Granny's house and Granny would comfort him and cuddle him and hold him and support him. And when dad was drunk and had beaten mum up, little Johnny could go and stay with Granny and Granddad for a while. Or when mummy needed a break, little Johnny could go and stay with Auntie Sally. Fast forward to the current generations, Granny and Grandad aren't down the street anymore, and neither's Aunt Sally. Everyone's completely separate. And mum doesn't get pregnant and stay at home to raise the baby because mum got told that she could have it all and she could do anything she wanted. So mum went to university and got herself a degree in an education and has actually worked really bloody hard to have a really big job. So mum's now trying to manage a really big job with no support because dad's also got a really big job and they both need to carry on in their really big jobs in order to support their really big house and their lifestyle and all of the rest of it. And so when baby comes along, mum has to go back to work after 6 months or 3 months or like no time at all if you're in the US. So there's no family support nearby. There's no other support. They've got to go back to work and the kids aren't having their developmental needs met. Ideally, a child would have mum there pretty much all the time for the first year of its life. It's pretty much unheard of in the modern day way that we parent and bring up children. And I am not shaming mums here, right? But that is just the norm. That is just the norm of how it's done. And the mums are absolutely at their wits' end because they're tired and they're exhausted and they don't really want to go back to work. Only they do want to go back to work because they don't want to lose their sense of identity. And it is one of the hardest and most challenging jobs ever. And I know I'm not a mum, but I have enough clients and I have had enough insights into this that the value placed on motherhood by our society is fucking diabolical. Because it is the most important and valuable role, because that is the foundation for the young people, for the generations of the future. That first early bond that forms the attachment style that that child will have will determine how it experiences every relationship for the rest of its life. And I think that it is remarkable that parents are spending time to try and understand more how they can care for their children in a way that doesn't leave them, their children, with the childhood trauma that their parents passed to them. And I think it's remarkable that parents are spending time with coaches and therapists, understanding, learning, working through this stuff, and experimenting with different approaches with their children. And I think it's disgusting that people think it's okay to write a book to shame well-meaning, hard-working parents who deeply, deeply desire to do the best for their children, but trying to look after the emotions of their children and support them is wrong. And I'm going to keep coming back to this. I'm going to keep repeating myself. But I think it's so, so important. And let's be super clear, there is stuff in that book that I completely agree with. There are some really shitty therapists out there. There are some really shitty coaches out there. There are therapists out there with a 7-year psychotherapy degree and 30 years experience who are so deeply narcissistic, psychologically damaged, and all of the rest going on that you have to wonder how on earth they have not had their licenses taken away from them and how on earth they get to practice. But they are out there. They are out there. There's no perfect, lovely solution. But when we try and polarize everything, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, we just end up more and more divided as a society. Whereas what hopefully this will come together as a cohesive whole in the end is actually if we take a more holistic approach and we draw from different things and we see what feels good, then we get to a place where we aren't facilitating and exacerbating what is a current mental health crisis. Because I tell you what ain't the number one cause, people going and getting support and finally talking through the stuff that they've had to bury down for so long. We don't need to be shaming anyone for that. It's hard enough for people to come and do it in the first place. Ask me how I know. So we've got the fact that people are left to parent on their own, massive challenge. You've got the fact that doctors haven't got time to actually take care of patients and see what's really going on. And this is not all doctors, right? I'm also not polarizing, but for the vast majority of time, they haven't got time to sit there and deeply delve into the mental health background, what happened to you when you were a kid, when someone comes in with some symptoms. They just haven't got, there's not, the capacity is not there, okay, in the health service. And this is something that I haven't talked about on the podcast before. I really deeply do not think that we can overlook what has happened in the way that we live our lives in the past 30, 40 years. Okay. And it's super easy to immediately jump on the bandwagon of all of our phones are to blame. It's our phones. It's our phones. It's social media. It's social media and our phones are addictive, and it's because we're just scrolling all the time and we can't contact with anyone, and we're all so lonely and we're all so isolated, and this is what's going on, and all the mental health problems are our phones. Now, I do think our phones have got a lot to answer for. Okay. But that's generally quite accepted. But again, I don't think we can pin all the blame on our phones. Okay. Because in many ways, the technological advances have allowed us to be more connected. But there is some other stuff that's happened and has changed in the last probably 60 years. Okay. And this is just something that I just want to float for you to think about and go away and explore it a little bit more if you would like to. And so, if there was a number one cause or a contributing factor that not enough people are talking about, I would like to argue or put a case forward for the ex-lawyer and me, the change in how we eat and the food supply. Because back in the 60s, I think, this is not a heavily researched episode, so don't come at me with the dates being wrong. Kellogg's had a massive advertising campaign. I was going to say propaganda. I was like, what's a better way of saying that? An advertising campaign extolling the virtues of cereal bars and cereal for breakfast and villainizing fats. And so there was this great wave of like everyone's having cereal for breakfast with orange juice. And the low fat era. Everything came in low fat. So we're no longer using butter, we're gonna have low fat spread. And I remember growing up with like Weight Watchers yogurts and all the Weight Watchers products. And we did everything that we could because there was such a value on being thin, as if that was healthy. I'm not saying it's not healthy, right? But there was this whole low fat movement. And it's only more recently that we understand, or it's more widely understood, that actually we really benefit and need, in order for ourselves and our bodies to function properly, a certain amount of healthy fat. Okay, I'm not saying everyone should go out there and be on the ketogenic diet, but like we need a certain amount of fat to exist and function properly. And then the other thing that happened with the cereals and the cereal bars and the processed foods and the low fat spreads, all of this stuff was chemically altered. It was processed. Like chemicals were added, additives were added. All of these different things started coming into the food supply. And a lot of the stuff that we've been eating has the impact on our bodies of disrupting the way that we're meant to operate. And in tandem with that, we've had this massive increase in genetically modified produce, but also in the use of more intensive farming methods. So in the past, there would have been a farming method where like you would have the crop and then the land would recover and the soil would be really high quality, and you would put like slurry or like natural products on the soil to put the nutrients back in the soil. And then more intensive farming started happening. And Monsanto and other companies came up with these really clever fertilizers that meant that the farmers could just continue to farm the land constantly. And you no longer needed this sort of slower farming method. And what has happened over time is that essentially worldwide, farming is now pretty much reliant on these fertilizers, unless it's organic. But then you've still got it in the water, so it's still getting rained on the organic stuff. Um, and the long and short of that is that the soil where the crops grow that used to give us the minerals, the vitamins, and all of the good stuff that we needed no longer does that. So our food is no longer the same quality as it once was. So we're not getting the nutrients that we need. Animals are mainstream fed a diet of antibiotics and all manner of other crap that we ingest. The seas are polluted, the fish are polluted, we've got microplastics, we've got heavy metal toxicity. And so our bodies are constantly being bombarded with toxins and pollutants, and they act as endocrine disruptors on our systems. And there is a wealth of evidence out there when you look at the rising levels of things like autism, ADHD, autoimmune diseases, and all of the rest of it, where there is a strong correlation between the changes in the food supply and our general health. And again, it's becoming much more mainstream, much more talked about, the fact that the gut operates as the second brain. So our gut health is deeply, deeply linked to our mental health. And the vast, vast majority of people are putting shit in their bodies all the time. Now, the unfortunate truth is that none of us can really avoid some toxins and some shit in our bodies because the world that we now live in is so toxic, so polluted, so messed up that we're all getting some of it, okay? But all of the time, all we're doing is taking it in, and we're not doing anything to support the body to be able to process and metabolize all of that. We're only going to keep getting more and more sick. The body is connected, the brain is connected, it's all connected. So we also have to take a really serious look at how is what I'm eating impacting my overall health and well-being, which includes my mental health, which includes how my brain is functioning, which includes how my body is functioning. And I think it's such an overlooked thing. And so rather than just allowing ourselves to be given the label, oh, I've got ADHD, I just need to take this medicine, more chemicals to go into your body. Maybe we also, and I'm not saying don't take the medication. I'm not here to be like anti, you do it you do it your way, right? But it's also like, but what's the thing behind that? Like, how has this happened? How is my system and my brain and my body in a place where this is how it is now functioning? And is there a way that I can support myself so that some of this stuff is less challenging for me? Because I think that when we start to tackle emotional support, emotional health, yes, talking therapy, yes, coaching, yes, working through that stuff, yes, doing the trauma healing, but also looking at our day to day. Okay, well, how am I functioning the rest of the time? What am I absorbing? Am I watching the news and it's just doomsday 24/7? Am I listening to people who are just bitching and moaning all the time? What's the impact of that on me? Am I constantly reaching for easy to eat, processed, full of shit snacks that are doing all manner of who knows what? to my body. And I wonder what would happen the more we allowed ourselves to live in a way that is natural, that is unprocessed in all of the ways, where there's less pushing, there's less forcing, there's less constantly being on the go. There's more connecting and laughing and sitting around a campfire, sharing stories and spending time in nature and eating real food with good friends, not gobbling something down at your desk. And prioritizing childhood and motherhood and supporting mothers and doing all of these things that we seem to have forgotten to place a value on. But let's not polarize and stigmatize and look for things that really broadly are really well meant and in a lot of times do an awful lot of good to try and sell a book or make a point and be controversial in order to pin the rise of the mental health crisis on something that I just really don't think it belongs to. And at the same time, let's stop with the labels. Let's not be asking 8-year-olds to go to hospital if they've tried to kill themselves recently, and if they have, why have they? Or how did they try? What was the method employed? Because that's not helpful either. But can we just look for more balanced ways? And can you look for more balanced ways when you think about, well, what do I need? How do I want to be healthy? How do I want to bring up my kids? What is it that I want? And really use your own brain and your own mind to dig through all of the various things out there. Trust in yourself to come to an answer that works for you and your family and the life that you want to lead, rather than be swayed by pretty inflammatory texts that make me angry. So that is what I have for you today. I would love to hear your feedback. I would love for you to come and share with me anything that you think I've missed or what you think about what I've said about essentially why we're all struggling in some way or another, whether it's with a physical ailment, a mental ailment, a combination of the two, lack of energy, stress, whatever. What do you think is going on? And what can we do to support it? Because we are getting to a point where this world needs more people to stand up and say, this isn't okay. And this is how I am going to provide my part of a solution to this problem. And you will notice your way isn't changing. My work isn't changing. But there will be an increase in the focus on overall well-being. And there will be an increase in me talking about some of the stuff that I think we need to be paying more attention to. So that is all I have for you. Take care of yourselves. I will see you again in a couple of weeks, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, because the more people, and I know you get this in the outro anyway, but the more people that get to hear this, the more people get to stop shaming themselves quite so much, but also the more change we get to see in the world. And that change is desperately, desperately needed. Okay, much love. See you soon. Before you go, I so hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, I'd like to ask you a favor, please, because the way that this podcast grows and the way that more people get to benefit from these materials is that more people find it. And that means that subscribes and likes and shares are so, so important to this space.
So, my ask of you, if you got value from the podcast today, is give it a review, give it a like, share it with a friend, and make sure that you are subscribed. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. And I look forward to continuing to support you to do life, business, relationships, and all of it your way.